What's the craziest thing your ex did after the breakup that made you realize you really dodged a bullet? After dating a girl for 6 months of constant drama, I finally had enough and ended things. She lived in another city at the time, attending school to become a nurse. That night, I ignored about 50 calls and later listened to a voicemail claiming she had been hit by a car and that I was a piece of crap for not answering when she was hurt. It was a complete lie. I stayed firm about the breakup, but a couple of days later, she called and announced to both of our families that she was pregnant with my child. After a few weeks of me pressing for details, the story fell apart and disappeared entirely because it was never true, and I knew that from the beginning. After that, she would call me constantly, screaming and saying she was going to off herself and that it was my fault. I was 19 at the time. If that had happened later in life, I would have shut it down much sooner. Back then, I was young, naive, and honestly, just happy to be in a relationship. She thrived on playing the victim in every situation. A couple of years later, I heard that another guy broke up with her and she went to his house. When he told her to leave, she pretended to fall and paralyze herself on his deck. He shut the door and left her there, and after lying there for a while, she eventually got up and left. It was wild to hear the lengths she would go to in order to keep a boyfriend. If she were not so unstable, she would honestly be a catch. She is married now to an older guy, and they have a couple of kids. She was already late-term pregnant when they got married, which I suspect was part of her plan. I've also heard that she now works as a nurse in a psychiatric ward of all places. Story 2. I dated a girl for 3 weeks before she started letting the crazy show. Ex-club dancer, drug issues, daddy issues, court battles, and so on. When I broke things off, she tried the classic "I'm pregnant with your child" routine. It turned out the baby wasn't mine, and she had known all along it was some D-bag she hated, though she still slept with him when she felt like it. She admitted this to me and apologized profusely. I figured being pregnant with someone she disliked was stressful, so I was tactful and supportive, telling her I appreciated her honesty, but that it was not going to get us back together. She did not like that. We have or had mutual friends, and she still tells them to this day, 6 years later, that it was my kid and that I forced her to get an abortion against her will. Story 3. My ex-girlfriend had cystic fibrosis and had received a living lobar lung transplant. I broke up with her because she was using drugs and I could no longer handle her deceit. She had also cheated on me. This all came after she claimed she was pregnant with my baby, which is extremely difficult for someone with CF and a lung transplant, and started showing increasingly erratic behavior. She would drive by my house at odd hours, tap on my bedroom window, and it got so creepy that I started sleeping on the couch for safety. She even threatened to run me down with her car or shoot me, though she didn't even own a gun. The only reason I tried to work things out with her after she cheated was because I truly cared for her and wanted to be there for her. Her mother had died, her father was a con man, and she and her siblings had been passed around among relatives. She had endured a very hard life. Before things got bad, I spent all my time and energy with her willingly and lovingly. I was with her almost every day while she waited for her lung transplant. I was with her the day she went in for the procedure, and I even got blood typed to see if I could be a donor. I wasn't a match. I would have given her a piece of my lung. I loved her that much. After the transplant, she cheated and started using drugs, and I couldn't handle watching her throw everything away. It broke me to see her that way, and I couldn't let her take me down with her. Eventually, her body rejected the lungs, and she passed away. I have always felt like it was the final F you from her to me. She had just turned 21. Story 4. She tried to fight me, like legitimately fight me. I had to fend her off for 20 minutes while she tried to punch me in the face and all over my body. I was really drunk, so I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I know it went on for a while. According to my friends, she pretty much just started fighting me out of nowhere. This was after she had slapped me as hard as she could in the face, which came after she'd spent the night trying to make out with me. Apparently, she finally got what she wanted because when I blacked out, we apparently made out for a while. But I did not want to, and that pisses me off. I haven't talked to her since, and that was 2.5 weeks. I don't think I will be talking to her much at all anymore. I have a little scar on my arm from where she dug a chunk of skin out with her nails. Story 5. Everything I'm about to describe happened in the 3 to 6 month period after we broke up. She called me 3,000 times in a single weekend. She routinely vandalized my car, pulling off the windshield wipers, caving in the hood, and leaving threatening messages. She broke into my apartment multiple times, vandalized it, including pictures of myself, and stole keys and other items. She would follow me on dates and leave stolen items from my apartment in my car. She repeatedly broke into my locker at work, leaving threatening letters and destroying my clothing. One day I came home while she was vandalizing the locks to my apartment. I immediately called 911. They had been called for previous break-ins by her, and while on the phone she beat me with her motorcycle helmet until it broke. She then used her keys to lacerate my arm as I tried to defend myself, my left arm holding the phone, my right arm protecting my head, while I begged the operator to send help. The cops eventually arrived and had to pull her off me. I was a bloody mess, and two unassociated witnesses confirmed what the 911 operator could only hear over the phone. I had to get an MRI, and my arm did not function properly for several months. When she was finally released from jail, she tried to get a restraining order against me, despite my having a 5-year plan already in place, because she claimed she was worried I would make her do something to violate the current restraining order against her. She was almost immediately arrested again thereafter. Story 6. She broke up with me, and we stopped talking. 4 months later, we started talking again and tried to be friends. She found out I had been dating a girl for about a week and began sending me explicit pictures of herself while I was with my new girlfriend. I would delete them immediately, got angry, and told her not to contact me again. The very next day, while my girlfriend was at my house, my ex sent me a text asking for pictures of my dong. I didn't even have a chance to reply because my girlfriend saw the message and immediately exploded, calling my ex names and cursing at her through texts. It was pretty funny. I blocked her number that same day. Unfortunately, my girlfriend eventually stopped talking to me because she couldn't trust me anymore. Story 7. An ex-girlfriend broke into my house to talk about how we should get back together. After about 30 minutes, she realized it was not happening. She then ran into my kitchen, grabbed a knife, and sat down on the couch threatening to hurt herself. I talked to her for a while until she calmed down, but she still refused to get up or leave. Eventually, I turned and started heading back down the hall toward my computer. That is when she rushed after me with the knife, yelling. After a short scuffle, she dropped the knife and fell through my drywall, giving herself a pretty solid bruise on her hip. To this day, that night is remembered by her and her family as the time I manhandled her. Story 8. I was around for someone else's unstable ex. I was sleeping at a friend with benefits house when his phone started blowing up. He ignored it, but then there was knocking at the door. When he went to answer, it was a girl he had gone on a couple of dates with. She was drunk, wanted to see him, wanted to talk, and refused to leave. At this point, asking her to leave only made her belligerent. The tipping point came when she got physically violent with him, so he called the police. Even if he had gotten her to leave, she was in no condition to drive. The police arrived and the party moved outside. It seemed like everyone was making peace and things were calming down until the banshee screaming of a drunk girl trying to fight the police. I could hear her yelling at them from inside the house. She ended up going to jail, and I went back to sleep. Story 9. My ex-wife stalked me continuously. She stole my car, ripped the fuses out, and removed the plates because I refused to talk to her. She created a MySpace profile of my then-girlfriend's dead brother just to mess with her. She keyed my car years after our divorce and would randomly call the cops claiming I was peeping at her house, usually while I was asleep. Then came the capper. I went by myself to pick up some belongings. She proceeded to beat herself up and called 911. I caught and lost the domestic violence case. I paid over $25,000 in court costs, lawyer fees, and probation. Pro tip, always, always, always bring someone with you as a witness. Divorcing unstable people is never fun. Oh, and did I mention she had printed out photos of my son? She wasn't his mother. Crazy. Story 10. She showed up. At my college dorm, which required a key to enter the building, a key to get into the suite, and a key to access my actual room. She was inside my room when I arrived. She told me she had footage of me essaying her and threatened to send it to the dean, the police, my parents, and a random list of people she pulled from my Facebook account, which she had hacked. Her terms were that I leave the girl I was dating, who did not exist. She then gave me a gift labeled as what would have been our X-month anniversary. I still do not know what it was. I threw it away. A few weeks later, she started sending me videos of herself hurting herself, which was deeply disturbing. Between dealing with lawyers and involving my parents, I failed out of school. She later told me that was her plan all along. P.S. If you're reading this, screw you. Story 11. This is my time to shine. I broke up with her, and I don't think she understood what breaking up actually means. At the community college I attend, I help out in the IT department after class to gain experience. During student breaks, the department does a lot of work in labs across campus, and I was helping out all day, every day, for a full week. One day, I saw her on campus, but she did not see me. Apparently, she had been asking everyone where I was, and I had to tell people not to say anything. For that entire week, I had to play hide and seek around campus because she was there every day, actively looking for me. On top of that, she constantly messaged me and tried to follow me on every social media platform, so I had to keep creating new accounts and blocking her. The worst part was when I mentioned I was going to a local concert for a band I really loved. I was excited and thought the night would be perfect, But right as my favorite band was about to take the stage, I looked over and saw her standing there. I had to leave immediately, and the night was completely ruined. I broke up with her in November of 2013, and this behavior still goes on. I am now in a new relationship, and I am very happy. Story 12. My uncle was dating a very outgoing woman with 3 kids. At a family dinner, she kept putting him down and bringing up personal issues nobody wanted or needed to hear about. Not long after, he ended things and started seeing another woman. That's when the real problems began. His ex would just walk into his house and start yelling at him, to the point where he had to change the locks. She harassed his own kids and even tried to get him fired by calling his boss and making up random accusations about him. She constantly emailed him about how amazing her life was and how she was having great time with other men, while simultaneously trying to get back together with him. He never even opened the emails, but thankfully saved every single one. That only seemed to make her angrier. Eventually, she escalated to following him, waiting outside his house while he was at work, and then following him home. Looking back, she always had a hint of being bat crap crazy while they were dating. It just didn't fully surface until after he left. Story 13. I have 2 scary stories. First, I met a guy through mutual friends and thought he was nerdy and funny. So we started hanging out at college events, music, theater, and so on. Eventually, we started dating, mostly focusing on getting to know each other. He began texting me constantly when I wasn't around. At first, I thought he was just clingy because of a bad breakup I had gone through, so I shrugged it off. Over time, he started dropping hints about wanting intimate time, even though I had just gotten out of a relationship and wasn't ready. I told him that clearly. One day, he came over and started taking off my clothes. I repeatedly asked him not to, insisting it wasn't the right time, but he didn't listen. And unfortunately, it gets worse from there. This guy came over to my shared apartment by asking my roommate to watch a movie with him while I was at work. She didn't know the situation, so she let him in. While she was in the bathroom, he rushed upstairs, went through my room, and somehow found a journal I had hidden. He stole it. He then spent hours copying everything I had written into an online journal and sent it to my friends and my ex, accusing me of being a cheat and a liar. He weaponized my private thoughts and then showed up at my apartment late at night with the journal, demanding I talk to him face to face. I was so afraid of what he might do that I called the police. By the time they arrived, he was gone. The next day, the journal was left on my doorstep with no note. After that, I was terrified to leave my apartment, go to classes at university, or walk to my car after work. I had panic attacks. Months later, I saw him on campus and all the fear came rushing back. I changed apartments, changed my license number, and made sure someone walked me to my car at night for several months. The fear that he might try to hurt me or essay me wouldn't go away. Second, many years later, I dated a man for just a few months who had that carefree, borderline dangerous edge that sometimes attracts young women. I had no idea at the start that he was addicted to drugs, and antidepressants. Near the end of our relationship, he stopped taking his medication. He would do reckless, attention-seeking things that could have gotten him deported from the country we were in. One night, when he was doing something extremely dangerous, I tried to intervene. He told me it was over, and a few uncomfortable hours later, I had moved all my things out of his apartment. A week later, after no contact, he demanded his guitar back, the only thing he had ever bought me aside from booze or food. When I reminded him it was a Christmas gift, he laughed and said he never considered it permanent anyway. A few days later, I was sent by post a drawing I had commissioned for him as a Christmas gift. And it was the last $300 I ever spent on a crazy D-head ever again. Story 14. Weeks after we broke up, he woke me in the middle of the night asking to cuddle. When I refused, he started arguing, then hit me over the head, stole my purse, pushed my head and torso through a 5th-story window, and locked and barricaded me in my own home. When I finally got out, he harassed me from the rooftop, shouting so loudly it woke up half of Chinatown. I called a friend, left town, left most of my belongings behind, and never looked back. Edit, I forgot to mention he also stole my phone while I was locked in and tried to text my friend not to come. Luckily, my friend sensed something was wrong and came over across the bay around 2 in the morning. At the time, he was my best friend. Now we're together, and we just celebrated our 2nd anniversary last month. At least there's a happy ending. Story 15, she broke up with me after saying she just didn't need a relationship at the time. My brother was dating her older sister, and he spent the day out at the lake with both of them and their parents. I couldn't go because I had promised a friend I'd play golf that day. Later that night, my brother told me that she had brought some guy with her and had been hooking up with him whenever they were out of sight of everyone. She even told her parents she had been dating him for a few months. She and I had dated for about 7 months. After the breakup, she called and texted me constantly for reasons I couldn't understand. I never answered. In an act of defiance, she went to my workplace and vandalized my car, smeared dog feces under all the door handles, poured Coca-Cola on my hood and windshield, and even stuffed a potato in my tailpipe. The cops couldn't do anything at the time because they couldn't prove it was her, until she confessed to my brother almost a month and a half later. Story 16. Years ago, I let a casual girlfriend move into my house temporarily when she didn't have a place to stay, only to discover that she was secretly a schizophrenic alcoholic. We're talking severe schizophrenia here, sometimes involuntarily hospitalized, prescribed lithium, the whole deal. It was a wild experience, nothing like coming home after work to find all the lights off, the blinds drawn, and her sitting in the dark, having full conversations with people who weren't there. Even a year after she was gone, I would still find empty natural ice cans hidden behind furniture or in closets. As I got to know the real her, it became clear that deep down she was, well, pure evil is the closest way I can describe it. Eventually, I had enough and physically picked her up and deposited her outside the back door, not violently, and locked it, but she refused to leave. This woman camped in my driveway for 3 days in a Miata, using my shrubbery as a makeshift bathroom. After 3 days, I managed to contact one of her relatives who agreed to take her in if I could get her there. A 50-mile drive. I convinced her to go and we set off down the interstate. About halfway, she had a change of heart and tried to open my pickup's door and exit while we were traveling at 65 miles per hour. I ended up restraining her with one arm while driving with the other for the rest of the trip. Looking back, it probably would have been smarter to pull over since if I'd been stopped, she could have easily claimed I was kidnapping her, or worse. After that experience, I didn't date for quite a while. Story 17. A friend of mine had an ex show up and let herself in on Christmas Eve in the early morning hours. He was in bed with his new girlfriend when she barged in, screaming and getting aggressive. Being the good guy he is, he didn't lay a finger on her. He just tried to shepherd her outside. She was almost out the door, but then stopped and asked him to hand her her high heels that she had taken off when she snuck in. He handed them to her, thinking it was over, and let his guard down. She swung the pointy end of the heels at his face, more of a slash than a poke, and almost popped his eye. He needed 30 to 40 stitches and bled all over his floor. I saw him the next afternoon before I knew the story and jokingly commented that he had some battle damage. After hearing what really happened, I felt terrible for making that remark. Story 18. My husband's ex-girlfriend flew from Delaware to his house in Southern California without any notice to pick up some clothes she'd left behind. This was nearly a year after they'd separated, with months of no contact. He had a couple of her bags in the basement, so he let her grab what she needed and thought that would be the end of it. She didn't even take much. When we cleaned out the basement a few months later, most of it was still there. It's been well over a year since that visit, and just 2 weeks ago, she contacted my father-in-law, claiming my husband still has her passport and threatening to come get it if he doesn't send it to her. We just can't seem to get this one to go away. Story 19. 'Twas New Year's Eve. I arrived at a house party shortly after the countdown, having received a text invitation from a good friend. Upon entering, I spotted my ex. Not wanting to be rude, I gave her a hug and said hi. We chatted for a few minutes about life and what we'd been up to, then I stepped away to play beer pong. During the game, my buddy, not the one who invited me, walked up and bluntly asked, "Do you mind if I hook up with Sharkisha?" My ex, not her real name. He explained she said she wanted to leave, so he thought he'd check with me first. I shrugged and said, "Dude, go for it. We broke up 3 years ago and I'm happy with LaRonda." He grinned and walked off. After my third or fourth game, I went outside to lean against my car and smoke a joint with the same buddy. That's when my ex's older brother stormed out to confront me. "Why does Sharkisha cry every time she sees you? Leave her the hell alone." I tried to de-escalate. "Dude, chill out. Let's step aside and talk." "Don't tell me to chill out," he bellowed, his face red with anger. He sucker punched my buddy and then took a swing at me. I reacted immediately, closed the distance, and landed several solid punches before he finally dropped his fists and seemed to realize just how stupid he was being. That's when my ex came storming outside. She shoved me hard and screamed, "Why can't you leave us alone? All you do is screw up my life." Then she grabbed her brother and dragged him away, and they left. A moment later, my buddy walked up to me, thanked me for creating space between him and her brother, and then casually added, "Oh yeah, I probably should have mentioned something after you said it was cool," I told Sharkisha. She freaked out, admitted she was just trying to make you jealous, then ran inside. I guess she told her brother to come out and kick your A. Thanks, bro. That would have been real nice to know before I got into a frigging fight. Story 20. The pain is still fresh on this one. Brace yourself. It's a long one. I separated from my ex-fiancé back in September 2013 after discovering she had been keeping a side relationship for the last 2.5 years. The other man? Her first boyfriend from high school. He got out of jail, tracked her down on Facebook, and they reunited. I'd been with her for 11 years. We were engaged and we had two small kids together. This guy is trouble incarnate. He deals drugs, doesn't have a real job, and S-workers have allegedly worked out of his apartment. There are claims he essayed a girl, and even videotaped the whole thing. She didn't press charges, but you get the idea. D-bag Steve in the flesh. I don't care what she does on her own time while I have the kids, but now my kids are telling me they've been inside his apartment and that he's been around the house. Naturally, I voice my concerns as a father over their safety. She brushes it off, saying they're fine. Given where he lives and the history involved, it's clearly no place for a child. So, back in early May, I called her house and, without a doubt, heard his voice in the background. I asked her about it, and, of course, she denied it. She wouldn't even let me say goodnight to the kids and hung up on me. Concerned, I called the police to request a welfare check and explained the situation. They showed up 4 hours later, citing that it wasn't a high-priority call. They did a walkthrough of the house, found that he wasn't home, confirmed the kids were safe, and called me back afterward. The next day, I got a call from the police asking me to come in. Naturally, I assumed it was about the welfare check. When I arrived, the officer told me that my ex had filed a report claiming I had tried to break into her house and was outside yelling hysterically. I explained that it had to be retaliation for the welfare check. He said he believed me, but due to a recent local incident where a man had murdered his wife, the department was taking no chances with domestic disputes. He advised me to explain everything to the judge. After posting bail, I went to court the next day. That's when I discovered she had authorized a protective order, meaning I couldn't see her or the kids, and had also filed a restraining order against me. I absolutely lost it in court and broke down in tears. My next court date was scheduled for May 30th, 2014. I left the court that day realizing one thing. There was no way I was going to let her ruin my life. I emptied my savings account to hire a good lawyer, determined to see this through. A few days later, I got the restraining order papers in the mail and took one look. 3 pages. That was it. 3 pages of whining about me, complaining about her boyfriend, and accusing her of being on drugs, which, to be fair, she did have a pill problem, and I had actually helped get her into therapy to control it. Not a single allegation of violence, not a single mention of the kids. I show up on May 30th. She has no lawyer. I do. I can see it immediately. She's a nervous wreck, shaking, stuttering, clearly terrified in front of the judge. The court denies her request for a restraining order against the kids and holds a continuance on her restraining order, since we ran out of time and I still need to handle the criminal charges with my lawyer anyway. They set a new court date for the following week. Meanwhile, she starts calling my lawyer, begging to drop all the charges and the restraining order. Last I heard, the state attorney was calling her to ask why she'd suddenly changed her mind after putting me through all of that. I already knew. She realized just how much of an a-hole she'd look like in court. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you D-Bag Stacy, Story 21. There was a woman I was seeing in college for a few years. For me, it was mostly a friends with benefit situation. I tried to keep that clear. I was friendly, but it was largely physical. She, however, apparently wanted more than I was willing to give, though she mostly kept it to herself. After a brief relationship with another girl ended, my FWB had a complete breakdown. She told me I had ditched her and that she could never forgive me. I felt guilty, but deep down, I realized our dynamic was toxic for both of us. Gradually, I started seeing her less and less, until the girl of my dreams came along and changed everything. Cue an email a few weeks later. She had somehow heard from a friend that I was dating someone new. She seemed sad, but insisted she still wanted to keep talking to me. To prove it, she sent me a list. My dad bought a bunch of games. Here's everything. The list included a few recent launch titles and some other games that I sincerely doubted her dad had bought, given they were a proper, conservative Christian family. I showed it to the girl I was dating, and we both agreed. She just wanted me back for herself. Last I heard, she was married and happy, so that worked out. As for the girl of my dreams, well, she'd probably be an entirely different story, and not one I talk about lightly. Story 22. When he dumped me, it was fine. 3 months in, not in love, started as a rebound. It just wasn't going anywhere. Then came the magic, meaningless words. Let's be friends. At first I thought, okay, maybe he means it. We didn't have any mutual friends, had met at a crappy job neither of us worked at anymore, but sure, if he wanted to try, why not? Nope. Friends actually meant him trying to sleep with me and me saying no, over and over until I finally had to tell him that our total lack of anything in common was making the whole friendship thing feel forced. It was time to give up the ghost. He cried. Awkward doesn't even begin to cover it. And yes, I reminded him he was the one who dumped me. We parted ways, and that was that. A year later, he started stalking me. To this day, I have no idea how he found out where I lived or worked, but he did. I'd switched both jobs and apartments by then, yet somehow he showed up anyway. He only ever approached me when I was alone. And this was after I had very clearly asked him, in those exact words, to stay out of my life. Suddenly, he was just there again. I don't know whether he knew I was dating someone new or not, but it escalated fast. One day, it got so bad that I literally had to run down the street to get away from him while he screamed after me, "I'm sorry, I was such a bad boyfriend." Which, for the record, is a wild thing to shout because he dumped me. And also, we were in our frigging 20s, not teenagers, fully grown adults. I dug out his old email and sent a very direct message, letting him know that if I ever saw him again, I would be filing a restraining order. The only response I received was, "Got it." He had another girl before me who actually did get a restraining order against him, so I think he took me seriously. Yes, I was young and naive and should have seen his past as a red flag. Since then, about 5 years ago, he occasionally tries to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn, and I just block him whenever a request comes through. Story 23. I dated this guy for 3 weeks. It was clear to me that we weren't a match and we had a calm, amicable breakup. Or so I thought. My ex immediately started with ridiculous, childish antics. Name-calling, constant calls, texts, and emails. He would accidentally send me messages meant for his friend. They were long, rambling manifestos about how heartbroken he was, how he'd been screwed over by that cold-hearted bish, how he could never trust again, how his soulmate had destroyed him, and how he wanted to hurt himself. I refused to be provoked. He tracked all my online activity and sent angry texts, like, "How dare you take time to write a review online but make no time to talk to me?" He was convinced I was sleeping with every man in the free world and threatened to email my colleagues, friends, and even my mom, detailing my imaginary antics. He called nonstop, followed me on every social media platform, and tried to bash me. I had to block him or change and delete all my accounts and usernames. Then he sent me pictures of his torso. All cut up, worried, I calmly suggested he seek help and apologized for any pain I had caused. He cried and said he thought we'd get married and I would become stepmom to his kids. Kids? In our short time dating, he never even mentioned that he was divorced with children. I stayed offline. Eventually, he chilled out. But even now, 3 years later, he will occasionally pop up with an innocuous, "What's up? Vet all prospective beaus?" Check. Story 24. Well, this story is more or less crazy because of who my ex started dating immediately after we broke up, but I digress. He and I were at my best friend's house nearly every day, and eventually, they started spending a little too much time together without me, under the guise of her learning guitar, no less. That's when they began cheating. My friend convinced him to dump me so he could be with her, telling him I was a cheap whore, that I didn't deserve him, and so on. After he finally came to his senses and escaped that woman, he told me she used to force him to drive to my house 2 or 3 times a week and wait outside with a baseball bat for hours, ready to knock my face in if I came outside. I was never able to figure out why, other than the fact that I had dated him first. The only reason I never ran into them is because they were both fairly daft and never realized that I always left the house through the back. Story 25. Compared to the comments I've read so far, my story is much more tame than I initially thought. But anyway, the day I, 16, broke up with him, 19, I had to drive him home since he didn't have a license. It was pretty silent and awkward. Once he got out of my car, he started calling and texting nonstop. I turned my phone on silent, and within a couple of hours, I had roughly 100 missed calls. The next morning, he showed up at my parents' house with his grandmother, who had kindly driven him, and cried outside for an hour until I finally agreed to talk to him. The same behavior continued for roughly 6 months, even though we had only dated for 3 months. Story 26. There's a chance I could be the crazy ex. I'm not sure. I've been with my ex since we were 14, and we have 2 kids. She left me and started seeing someone else. I spent a month trying to convince her she was making a mistake. She left because she was tired of me relapsing on heroin. I completely understood and knew I could stay off the stuff. I had only been in recovery a little over a year. When I would see the kids, I'd give her my sob story about needing her, which probably made her very uncomfortable. She had been seeing this new guy for a month, and he started threatening me. I ignored it because I was trying to change my life, get sober again, and I'm an adult with 2 kids. I wasn't going to fight anybody. She and I talked more. He got heated and started threatening me and my brother with really vulgar stuff. One of my brothers ended up beating him up. Now, I've been trying not to persuade her to come back because I want her back, but don't want to manipulate the situation. She's been talking to me and I think she wants me back. So, I think I'm the crazy ex. Story 27. He wasn't an ex. We started out as friends. He developed a crush on me, but I was honest and told him I didn't feel the same way. We were in the same friend circle, so it was hard not to see him around people we both knew. Over time, though, I started noticing that I was running into him more and more often, at seemingly random times and places. I'm from a small town, but it isn't that small. One Friday night, I was going to a birthday party at a bar in a nearby town with a friend. I had left my car at work and rode with her, planning to stay at her place for the night and pick up my car in the morning. I was at the bar with friends, having a great time. I'd had a couple of drinks and was feeling good. Then I looked across the bar and saw him sitting alone, staring at me. I'm not the most confrontational person, but since I had a couple of drinks in me, I walked over and asked him what he was doing there, watching me. My blood ran cold. Of all the bars in our area, he just happened to be at the same one I was, and he didn't say, hello, didn't acknowledge me, just watched. Alarm bells were going off. Something wasn't right. He never answered. He just stood there with a creepy smile on his face. I got frustrated and started yelling, then hitting him. I'm 5 feet tall, he's 5'7", and at least 150 pounds heavier than I am, but he never touched me. I know I was in the wrong and could have been arrested for assault, but I was angry, scared, and drunk. Not a great combination. Eventually, my friend pulled me away. We left, and I didn't think about him for the rest of the night. A few days later, on my day off, I was running a couple of errands when he started calling my cell phone. I didn't answer. He called me 20 times in a 20-minute span. When I got home, all those alarm bells started ringing again. I was still in my early 20s, living with my parents, and home alone. Their house sits at the bottom of a hill on a cul-de-sac. He kept calling, and I kept ignoring. Buy it. Then the doorbell started ringing. My car was in the driveway, so he knew I was home, but I refused to answer the door. My phone was ringing, and the doorbell was going almost nonstop, and I could hear him yelling through the door. Finally, I'd had enough. I should have called the cops, but being young and naive, I thought I could handle it myself. Again, I'm 5 feet tall. I was holding a baseball bat. I opened the storm door, but kept the screen door shut and locked. He was angry and kept asking why I was ignoring him. I told him I wanted him to leave me alone. He got even angrier and genuinely could not understand why it was wrong to call someone more than 20 times in a row. I finally snapped and told him to get off my property, or I would call the cops and have him arrested. That seemed to get through to him, and he slinked off. That's when I noticed he wasn't driving his usual car and had parked it up the hill so he wouldn't be noticed. My blood still runs cold. When I think about what could have happened if he'd tried to break in and hurt me, he never called me again. And aside from one random encounter about a year later, I never ran into him. When I did, he quickly went in the opposite direction. He took what I said very seriously, at least. This was at least 7 years ago, and I'm very thankful it didn't end differently. Story 28. Several years ago, I met a girl at a party hosted by mutual friends. We hit it off and started dating for about a week. One day, I took more than 5 minutes to respond to one of her texts, and she accused me of cheating, chasing jailbait, and being a predator. Over the next 2 weeks, she went around telling all of our friends that I was a PDF file. I still hang out with all of those friends. She does not. I later learned that she had a long pattern of doing this. She would join a new social group, hook up with one of the guys, then completely spiral and spread extremely harmful lies about them. Story 29. I dated a guy for 2 years. We fought constantly, but I was convinced he would eventually stop the abuse. Eventually, he was prescribed antipsychotics after finally being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. For the first time since we started dating, he was stable. Then, after taking his medication for a few months, he decided he was cured and immediately quit. You have never experienced a psychotic break until you've lived with someone who has no idea they've gone insane. After multiple frantic calls to the police and the destruction of all my most precious belongings, I realized that if we stayed together, one of us wouldn't make it out alive. I told him that if he didn't go back on his medication, he would end up doing something that would forever change his life. We split up, and 9 months later, he texted me a photo of his 2-day-old son with the caption, "You were right. I should have listened to you. You were always right." I was nauseous, and it wasn't long before I was violently ill. He had slept with his best friend once during the psychotic break and got her pregnant. Did I mention he is gay? Like permanent Kinsey scale 5-6 gay? His one and only time with a girl and his life was forever changed by his psychotic stubbornness, despite my efforts to warn him. Story 30. An ex-boyfriend who spent almost 5 years physically, mentally, and emotionally abusing me proposed after we had broken up. I don't know why, but it seriously messed with my head. He had moved to New Orleans to help with Katrina cleanup. I was honestly surprised that such an a-hole would do something so noble. He sent me a huge box of stuff for Valentine's Day, then showed up at my parents' house with a ring. My dad quickly convinced him he should leave. Maybe it doesn't sound as crazy when you read it, but going through it was pretty nuts. Story 31. My ex was unstable, but I guess I got off easy compared to some stories on this thread. He once beat up his own disabled mother when she tried to tell him to obey the restraining order I had against him. He didn't even remember doing it. His brain is literally that messed up, and he wonders why I left. Of course, she's messed up too. Guess who paid his bail for the domestic violence charges and didn't testify at the trial? That woman was several chicken nuggets short of a Happy Meal. A few days later, I got a rock through my driver's side window. He called me later to tell me he had thrown it because I wasn't talking to him. Like, no kidding. The restraining order says no contact. Why are you calling me? I only answered because the local cops told me they couldn't really do anything about phone harassment, and I wanted to know for sure if it was him who damaged my car. It did end up saving me from a ticket once. I was driving home from work one night, pretty tired, and didn't stop at a stop sign. I got pulled over, and the officer noticed tape around my window. I'd tried covering it with plastic because I couldn't afford a replacement yet, and asked what happened. I told him my crazy ex had put a rock through it. I got off without even a warning. Didn't mention to the cop that the ex had done it almost 6 months earlier. Story 32. The first thing he did was drive by my house when I wouldn't respond to the dozens of messages he had sent. Then he started looking through my call history. I wouldn't even have known if he hadn't said, "Oh, so that's why you called the bank," after I mentioned that I had lost my wallet. I still had the phone his grandparents had kindly gotten me while I was trying to find a job. He began posting passive-aggressive status updates on Facebook, which I was blocked from seeing. Eventually, they escalated to calling me a terrible human being, accusing me of cheating and telling everyone he had been planning to propose to me. We had been dating less than 2 years, and he was going to use his grandparents' money to buy the ring. When my mom finally stopped putting up with his BS, he went after my youngest brother, 15, calling her a bitch and accusing me of poisoning her image of him. After that, my little brothers couldn't stand him. Yet somehow we saw him, his new girlfriend, and her 2 kids from an abusive ex walking to his graduation 2 weeks ago. The craziest ex I had before him was a guy who sent me a letter covered in blood, but at least when I told him that nothing was going to come of it, he actually let it go. Story 33. When my ex found out I had moved on and had a new girlfriend, she went looking for me. She came to my house, broke through the doggy door, took some of my belongings, and asked my alcoholic father where I was. Realizing what was happening, he told her I had just left in such and such direction for a bike ride, so she hopped in her Jeep and went looking for me. I was riding in a neighborhood when I heard tires squealing from behind. I rode up onto the sidewalk to be safe. When I looked back, I saw the Jeep barreling down the sidewalk, and bam, she hit me. I went flying into a wall and fell into a bunch of cacti. She got out of her car and started punching and kicking me, but a witness intervened, dragged me into their car, and took me to the hospital. My bike was trashed, and I had cuts and scratches all over. Afterward, she tracked down my girlfriend and told her and her family that she had had an abortion and was currently pregnant with my child because I was irresponsible. Story 34. Soon after I kicked him out, I had fallen asleep on the couch watching a movie and woke up to him kissing me. I freaked out. He left, but I called the cops anyway. About a month later, he started living in his vehicle across the street from my place. The cops promptly told him he was not allowed to do that and threatened him with a restraining order. About a month after that, he broke into my vehicle and stole my ID. I'd left my purse in there, bad idea. Birth certificate, passport, iPod, and the dog's seatbelt. He even left a note on my birth certificate, which I had just retrieved from our old safety deposit box, saying, "Keep this until we can be married again." He eventually gave up once I started dating again, but until then, he would randomly drive by and honk. Got to love small towns. Story 35. I was seeing this girl every week for about 2 months. It started off officially as a friends with benefits arrangement, since most of what we did together was in bed. Over time, she started falling for me and became increasingly unstable. One Saturday, she asked if we would ever be together. I didn't give a clear answer because although we had great chemistry, her progressively unstable behavior, over drinking, excessive PDA, and constant texting, made me cautious. She responded by meeting someone on Tinder and sleeping with him. After that, she went into a bout of depression and wrote me one of the longest, most heart-wrenching confession letters I've ever received. Long story short, I forgave her and tried for a week to make it work, which involved one more episode of hooking up. And she gave me chlamydia. Story 36. Nothing can top one of my coworkers in the 1990s when his former fiancée shot herself in the head on his front lawn. A little backstory. He was dating this girl whom I never knew was unstable. I saw this guy about twice a year, generally at conferences, and his girlfriend usually accompanied him. They had lavish galas where SOs were allowed, so for years I just saw them together and assumed they were happy. One year I asked him where she was and everyone got quiet. I thought they had split up, but it turned out she was going through some rough times that spilled into their relationship. They got engaged, but it only made things worse until he finally broke it off. After that, she spiraled. She stalked him, called him repeatedly, and even called his work, usually crying and begging him to come back. One night, she was on the front lawn of his townhouse screaming and crying for him to come out. He told her that if she didn't leave, he would call the cops. She said nothing could make her leave, so he closed the window and called the police. Then he heard a loud bang. At first, he thought she was throwing something at the house, but while on the phone with the police, he looked out and saw a neighbor running to her body. She had shot herself in the head, and it was immediately fatal. He told the police, who called an ambulance, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. It messed him up for a while. Story 37. He had always been an atheist, then suddenly converted to Catholicism. Shortly after, he married my friend after just a weekend of hanging out together. Her friend had given her an eighth of bud, and he ratted her out online, at her workplace, and to the cops, claiming she was a major drug dealer. When he faced negative attention and the marriage was annulled, he started claiming that all of his best friends were big-time drug dealers too. Friends who had good jobs, kids, and had always supported him. He was eventually arrested for harassing communications, among other charges. His mugshots are genuinely creepy. Whoever he used to be is long gone. Mental illness is truly terrible. Story 38. Not my ex, my fiance's. She had a history of anger and violent tendencies, and her attacking his kid was understandably the breaking point in their relationship. She showed up at my house claiming she was pregnant by him, insisting I leave him alone, and making me swear up and down that we hadn't had intimate relations. My fiancé and I talked it out. He told me she was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and we straightened things out. She later had a miscarriage, and he and I continued seeing each other. She then took his phone and texted me pretending to be him, saying he was still in love with her and had been carrying around a ring for her. She did the same to him, changing my number in his phone and sending texts, claiming I would get a restraining order if he didn't stop contacting me. She still denies everything. About a month after we figured it out and got back together, she followed me from my house to the gym and tried to hold me by my neck in the parking lot. Needless to say, there are several court cases pending against her. Update, she even had the audacity to file a restraining order against my fiancé, claiming he essayed and abused her. This is completely false. He was literally vomiting his guts out at the time she claims it happened. Sigh. Story 39. I lived with a girlfriend who claimed she heard voices. Those voices told her I was cheating with my ex, who was living across the country at the time. They also fueled repeated self-harm attempts, toxic relationship patterns, physical and emotional abuse, toward animals, and intense self-loathing. She would spiral, becoming deeply entrenched in self-hatred while also playing the victim. We fought, and by that, I mean we brawled. I realized things had gone too far when she hit me over the head with a skillet and I woke up in the hospital. I left the next day. Sometime later, I saw her on the street. She was homeless. Story 40. I was stuck in a vicious cycle of dating people who were bad for me. Being a patient and understanding partner, they tended to cling to me, even if they probably didn't love me. They loved that I put up with so much and supported them endlessly. I finally broke the cycle with a recent ex. It wasn't perfect. I took too long, and by the time it ended, I was basically over her and no longer in love, even though I had tried hard before finally ending things. I tried to be kind and make her understand that I didn't want to abandon her, but we wanted different things and weren't well matched. Soon after, completely by coincidence, I met someone new. I normally don't start dating right after a breakup, but we had irresistible chemistry and mutual attraction. I also felt that even if it was soon, why deny myself? I was a single adult and wanted something good, even if it turned out to be just a fling. Spoiler alert, we're still together after almost 5 years. My ex saw us together on the street once and then saw us being friendly on Facebook. Just 1 or 2 posts joking about a movie we saw, nothing romantic. She figured out something was up. I'm not a good liar, so I admitted that we were casually going on a date or two, downplaying it as much as I could. She lost it. I went over to her place to try to talk things out, and she completely lost control. I was used to her tears and dramatics by then, but this was on another level. She locked herself in the bathroom and tried to hurt herself. I managed to get in and tried to call the police, but she ripped the phone out of my hands and smashed it on the floor, screaming in my face the entire time. Not words, just raw rage. I found her phone, had to plug it into a charger in the kitchen, and called 911. They came to get her, and I had to help lead her out of the apartment with the police. She was in her socks because they didn't want to wait for her to put shoes on. I later went back for her shoes and purse after she was already in the ambulance. At the hospital, once they took her to see a doctor, a very kind paramedic came over and told me he didn't think I should stay and that this was a good time to leave. So I did. If he hadn't said that, I probably would have sat in the emergency room for hours, feeling like I couldn't go because there was no one else for her. Her family lived many hours away, and they were far more hardened to her behavior than I was. She had a history of self-harm, so while I knew a safety pin wasn't exactly lethal, I called because I was afraid to leave her. alone in an apartment full of genuinely dangerous things like knives and prescription drugs. I wanted someone else to take responsibility. She was not mine anymore, and I was exhausted from being forced into the roles of girlfriend, best and only friend, part-time therapist, verbal punching bag, and emotional security blanket. She decided she couldn't handle seeing me with someone else and cut contact completely, deleting me from all social media. That was a huge relief. I haven't spoken to her since. For a while afterward, though, I would get intense anxiety, heart palpitations, and shortness of breath just from seeing police cars or ambulances. Story 41. My ex stalked me for 3 years after we ended things. He smashed my very expensive camera, slashed the tires on my parents' horse trailer and truck, and threatened to hurt me multiple times. He also threatened my family and their horses. He followed people I knew, called my friends and relatives, sometimes sobbing, sometimes screaming, and would show up at friends' houses looking for me. At one point, he told my dad that I was meeting with many men for money. He even got my name tattooed on his arm. I'm sure there's more that I've pushed out of my memory. Thankfully, he has moved on now, but the creepiest part is that he married a woman with the same name as me. Story 42. He broke into my house because he said he needed to talk to me. He claimed he saw a picture of a little white fence in my bedroom window and took it as a sign that he was welcome. He also posted photos of all the letters we had written to each other, along with pictures of me that he had printed from my old MySpace account. We dated for 6 months when I was 15. All of this started when I was 18. I am 20 now, and he was released from jail 9 months ago after violating his probation by showing up at my house again. Edit. I haven't spoken a single word to him in 3 years. Story 43. Takyan-san dumped me for seemingly no reason a few months before we were supposed to get married. About 2 months, almost exactly. She said we could still try to be friends, which I agreed to. The first time we hung out after the breakup, she was being very touchy and wanted to do it with me. I said no a few times, admittedly half-heartedly. She kept insisting, "Shut up and just do it." I said only if it would not hurt our friendship. She assured me it would not, repeating the same when I asked again. The next day felt strange, very strange. She has been a giant bitch to me ever since. When I went to pick up the last of my stuff from her house, the 2 weeks she had known exactly when I would be coming were apparently not enough. She had a guy there. When I called her on it a few weeks later, after many more a-hole things she had done, she said he was just a friend there to help her because she was sick that day. We had dated for over 3 years. I knew all of her friends. I had never seen this guy before. He was rubbing her leg, did not help move a thing, and she was more than capable of helping me herself. She was not sick at all. Just to name a few of the other random things she did, she waited a solid 22 hours after we broke up before sleeping with another guy, refused to give back the TV my parents had given me, and told me for a few weeks she did not want our table. Then got mad when I showed up to take it. She got pissed when I asked if her roommate, a mutual male friend, would disconnect his PS3 from my PS Plus account. He had said he would whenever I wanted, and his phone was out of commission, so I texted her because she wanted to be able to play games, even though she is not a gamer. She also got mad because I had the power shut off. I was dumb enough to believe her when she said she would take care of it, and 2 months later, the power company called me, saying I owed a few $100s. These are just a few things that came to mind. Wall of text. Story 44. She stalked me for a few months. It started when I was young, at the tender age of 19. I decided that enough was enough. Virginity was not my thing. So I went and tried to lose it, and she was the one I did it with. Poetry was her weakness, if you care to know. After the first night, we had a brief, torrid affair, but I knew it would not last and that I would have to break up eventually. After one of our double dates, she asked to drive. She mentioned she had just gotten her learner's permit and wanted to take the wheel. Stupidly, I let her. She rammed the car into a gutter, damaging the unibody and suspension, making it inoperable. This happened on a Sunday afternoon, and I had to report to my company at 0300 for final layout at the National Training Center, where we would be staying for 45 days. The center is where we train for desert warfare at Fort Irwin, California, about 35 miles from Death Valley. Needless to say, I was kind of screwed and barely got home in time to change. While at the National Training Center, I decided this would be the perfect time to simply let things go. I did not return any phone calls or messages. I know now that was the worst way to break up, that it only festers, but I took the coward's way out. About 10 months later, I called her back, mainly to make sure she did not have a kid of mine. I had not used a condom the first time we slept together. The only time that ever happened. We went out for coffee and everything seemed fine. She was impressed with how well I was doing, and she was having money problems. I joked about going into the army, and she gave this little nod that I ignored until about 7 months later. We parted as friends and promptly forgot about each other. Or, to be more honest, I forgot about her. She did not show any weird behavior at the coffee shop. That came much later down the line. 7 months went by and things were going well, so my friends and I decided to go see Texas for all it was worth. First stop, Schlitterbahn, or however you spell it, the third biggest water park in the world. We went, and Bernard, the friend I had set up with her best friend, said, "Hey Kirby, is that Samantha?" Meanwhile, all 7 of my other friends were like, "That is the woman Kirby was with?" As a gentleman, I refused to talk about it with them, both before and afterward. Bernard and I had kept both of our relationships secret. I am still wondering what he is hiding about his. Let's just say they are not the most sensitive of guys, or as one of them called themselves, knuckle draggers. It pays to hang with idiots. Not only do you never have to worry about getting your A kicked, they keep you around to do things like simple math, but in a fight, they are the best. I love those guys, but I could never take them home to meet Grandma. They would give her a heart attack. So I said hi to her. She ditched the guy. She was with and hung out with us all day, or more specifically, with me all day, no matter what my friends did to her. She talked about what she had been doing the last few months, and, lo and behold, she had joined the army and requested Fort Hood to be close to me. My "I'm screwed" light started blinking. Then she told me she was going to be a financial specialist. My "I'm screwed" light went from blinking to solid. It was official. I was screwed. If she had been Cindy Crawford, or the most gorgeous woman in the world, I still would have run away screaming from her. If she is a finance puke and things go south in the relationship, and with her, it is not a matter of if but when. My pay would be screwed up until I got out of the army. I mean, come on, how many times has your money been messed up by the army without any help? Now, put an angry, vengeful woman behind it. I do not think so. So I sicked my knuckle-dragger friends on her, told them to get the crazy bish away from me and to take the gloves off. Again, not my proudest moment, but she was damaged goods and I did not want her getting any more attached than she already was. They went after her in ways I would not have thought of in 1,000 years. This day should really have its own post. But suffice it to say that after a few hours of the most humiliating things that could have been thrown her way, she eventually realized I was not going to protect her from her tormentors, that I was not going to save her, and that I was merely the silent party among a group of a-holes. This was her Vader moment, I see in hindsight, but she left, and I thought nothing of it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.